A sea of white folding chairs stretched across a manicured lawn. A tent, strung with golden lights, glowed even in daylight. The sound of a gospel choir rehearsing drifted through the summer air, mixing with laughter and children's voices. To everyone invited, it was a wedding. But to one woman peering from behind her curtains, it was something else. Her name was Margaret Whitfield, 62 years old, retired school teacher, widow, churchgoer, pillar of the community. She had lived in Willow Creek for decades and considered it her kingdom. She prided herself on knowing every neighbor, every lawn height, every car parked on the curb. And now, she was convinced that the wedding happening across the street was a threat. Her eyes narrowed at the crowd. Men in tailored suits, women in dazzling dresses, expensive cars lining the street. The guests were mostly black, with a few Latinos and Asians scattered among them. To Margaret, it didn't look like her neighborhood. She muttered to herself, "Something isn't right. Too many strangers. Too much noise. You don't just bring this many people here unless—" Her paranoia filled the silence of her empty living room. She picked up her phone, and with a single call, she would unleash a storm that would change her life and the lives of everyone across the street. Voiceover, suspenseful tone. A neighbor's prejudice, an FBI raid, and a groom whose identity would freeze every officer on that lawn. This is not just a story about a wedding. It's a story about fear, power, and the moment love stood taller than hate. The bride and groom. Across the street, inside the glowing tent, Vanessa Carter stood before the mirror. She was radiant, wrapped in ivory lace, her veil shimmering like light itself. Her hands shook as her bridesmaids adjusted her gown. "Breathe, Ness," her maid of honor whispered. "You've got this." Vanessa smiled nervously. "I know. I still can't believe today is real." Because this wasn't just any wedding. It was hers. And she was marrying Marcus Avery. Marcus wasn't just the love of her life. He wasn't just the man who made her laugh until her ribs hurt, or who held her through nights of doubt. He was also the governor of the state. Young, charismatic, a rising political star, Marcus had built his reputation on fighting corruption, protecting marginalized communities, and giving a voice to the unheard. But in this moment, all titles fell away. To Vanessa, he was simply her Marcus, the man she had met in college, who had carried her books when she sprained her ankle, who had proposed with tears in his eyes. Today was supposed to be perfect, but perfection rarely survives the weight of prejudice. Margaret's call. Back in her kitchen, Margaret dialed with steady fingers. "Hello, FBI? Yes, I need to report something suspicious happening in my neighborhood. I think it might be a gang gathering, or maybe something worse." The operator asked for details. Margaret gave them eagerly. The number of cars, the unknown people, the loud music, the possible weapons. She had mistaken camera equipment for rifles. She ended with a chilling line. "I'm telling you, it doesn't feel safe. Send someone before it's too late." The agent on the other end, trained to take every threat seriously, logged the call. Within an hour, black SUVs and armored vehicles were mobilized, and as Margaret peeked from behind her blinds, a small, satisfied smile tugged at her lips. "That'll teach them," she whispered. She had no idea what storm she had just summoned. The celebration begins. The string quartet struck the first notes of Pachelbel's canon in D. Guests rose to their feet, heads turning as the bride appeared. Vanessa's father held her arm tightly, pride shining in his eyes. She walked slowly, her veil fluttering, her smile trembling between joy and nerves. Every gaze followed her as she approached the altar where Marcus stood waiting. Marcus's heart pounded, but not from nerves about vows. Something else gnawed at him. Maybe it was the faint hum of engines outside the estate. Maybe it was instinct. the politician in him who had spent years learning to read a crowd. But he pushed it aside. Tonight, he was not Governor Avery. He was simply a man about to marry the woman he loved. Shadows on the perimeter. Half a mile down the road, a convoy of black SUVs slowed to a crawl. Radios whispered. Men and women in tactical vests loaded gear. Special Agent Reeves adjusted his earpiece. He had led dozens of operations in his career. He could usually smell trouble before it appeared. But tonight, something didn't sit right. Through his binoculars, he saw the scene. Chairs, flowers, musicians, a minister. Guests in elegant dresses. He frowned. This looks like a wedding. Agent Carter, his second-in-command, didn't blink. Could be a cover. We've seen traffickers stage events before. Hide in plain sight. Reeves kept watching. The intel they'd been given spoke of suspicious gatherings, possible weapons, large vehicles. The caller had sounded insistent, almost panicked. Protocol demanded caution. All units, Reeves muttered. Advance silently. Do not breach until my signal. The agents fanned out, crawling through hedges and shadows. Inside the estate, the music swelled louder. Two worlds, joy and suspicion, crept toward collision. Guests start noticing. In the second row, an elderly senator leaned toward his wife. "Darling, do you hear that?" She paused. Engines. A low, steady growl beyond the hedges. Her smile faltered. Behind them, a child tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mommy, there are policemen in the bushes." The mother hushed her quickly, but her own eyes widened. She caught a flash of dark movement. A figure crouched low, rifle angled. A ripple of unease began to spread, though quietly. Guests exchanged nervous glances. Parents pulled children closer. Still, Vanessa walked on, eyes locked on Marcus. To her, nothing else existed. Margaret watches. Across the street, Margaret leaned against her window frame, wine glass in hand. Through the blinds, she could see the subtle motion now. Black uniforms moving closer. Her lips curled in satisfaction. There it is. Order restored. Someone finally listened. She told herself she had done her civic duty, that she was keeping the neighborhood safe. But deep down, another voice whispered, "You just couldn't stand them celebrating, could you?" She drowned that thought with another sip of wine. At the altar. The officiant raised his hands. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here to celebrate one of life's greatest blessings." Applause rippled. Tears shone in the eyes of family and friends. Phones discreetly lifted, recording every moment. Marcus reached for Vanessa's hands. They trembled inside his own. He whispered, "You look like a queen." She whispered back, "And you look terrified." He chuckled softly, "Only of losing you." The crowd laughed warmly. The tension seemed to dissolve, at least for a moment. But then, in the corner of his vision, Marcus spotted something that froze him. A man in tactical gear, crouched behind the tree line. His smile faltered. The agents advance. Reeves' radio buzzed. "Command says move in now. Possible armed threat confirmed." Reeves frowned. Confirmed? By who? He scanned the estate again. All he saw were families, children, an officiant holding a Bible. No weapons, no threat. His gut screamed this was wrong. But orders were orders, and dozens of agents were already in motion. The quartet's music faltered as violinists spotted shadows slipping closer. The officiant stammered mid-sentence. Murmurs rippled through the guests. Marcus tightened his grip on Vanessa's hand. The moment of realization. The FBI line broke through the hedges at once. Dozens of agents in black jackets spilled into the open, rifles raised, forming a perimeter around the wedding lawn. Gasps filled the air. Guests screamed, children cried, parents shielded them instinctively. The officiant dropped his book. "What? What is this?" A bridesmaid shrieked. Photographers lowered their cameras in confusion, and Marcus Avery, governor of the state, stood frozen at the altar, his bride's hand still in his. He stepped in front of Vanessa instinctively, shielding her. His voice thundered across the silence. "Lower your weapons! Now!" But the FBI agents, unaware of who stood before them, kept their sights trained on the guests. The joyous wedding had turned into a scene of terror. Margaret's satisfaction. Across the street, Margaret's heart pounded with adrenaline. She could see the guests scattering, the agents closing in, the chaos unfolding just as she had predicted. She smiled into her wine glass. "Order restored," she whispered. She had no idea the next few minutes would destroy the illusion of control she thought she had. Chaos at the wedding. The once serene lawn was chaos now. Guests crouched behind chairs. Some dove beneath tables. Children sobbed as mothers wrapped arms around them. The gospel choir, who only minutes ago sang harmonies of joy, were frozen in stunned silence. The officiant held his hands up trembling, as if surrendering. "Please, officers, this is a wedding. You've made a mistake." But the rifles didn't lower. The agents had trained themselves to expect deceit, and in that expectation, every face could look like a threat. Vanessa's heart pounded so loudly she thought she might faint. She clung to Marcus's sleeve. "Marcus, what's happening? Why are they here?" Marcus's jaw clenched. His instincts screamed to de-escalate, but his protective rage burned hotter. He stepped forward, his voice thunderous. "Put those weapons down!" The command carried power, not just from fearlessness but from authority. The tone of a man used to commanding armies of politicians, police, even crowds. Some agents hesitated, rifles wavering, but their commander barked, "Hold your line! No one moves!" The lawn bristled with tension, seconds from disaster. A groom revealed. Special Agent Reeves shouldered forward, signaling his men to stay alert. He raised a megaphone. "This is a federal operation. You are surrounded. Nobody move." He squinted at the man shouting back, tall, broad-shouldered, suit crisp even under the stress. The voice had struck him with uncanny familiarity. "Who are you to give my men orders?" Reeves snapped. Marcus strode forward, Vanessa tugging his arm in panic. He threw his voice across the entire estate. "I am Marcus Avery, the governor of this state, and you have just stormed my wedding." The words cracked the air like thunder. Gasps tore from the guests. The officiant staggered back in disbelief. Cameras, still rolling in trembling hands, zoomed in. The FBI line faltered instantly. Some agents lowered their weapons, eyes wide. Others froze in horror. Even Reeves's megaphone sagged. Whispers surged like a tidal wave through the crowd. "The governor? Oh my God." They pointed rifles at the governor? Vanessa's knees weakened. She gripped Marcus's arm tighter. She had known marrying a public figure meant scrutiny, but this was something darker. An invasion at the altar. Margaret's world tilts. Across the street, Margaret's wineglass slipped from her fingers and shattered. She heard the words, too, carried on the summer wind. Governor Marcus Avery. Her mouth went dry. The man she had called suspicious, the man she had labeled a threat, was not just legitimate. He was the most powerful elected official in the state. Her satisfaction curdled into nausea. What have I done? But it was too late. The storm she summoned was raging, and she could no longer call it back. Marcus takes control. Marcus moved with purpose now, his voice steady despite the fire in his chest. "Reeves, is it?" You brought armed men into a private residence, disrupted a wedding, and terrified my guests, without verifying a single fact. Explain yourself. Now. Reeves stammered, sweat dripping beneath his cap. He had never been dressed down by a sitting governor, especially not in front of civilians, cameras, and his own men. We received a credible tip, sir. Possible gang activity. Possible weapons. Does this look like a gang meeting to you? Marcus roared, pointing at sobbing children, terrified elders, trembling bridesmaids. Does this look like a cartel hideout? This is my wedding, agent. The agents shifted uncomfortably. Some glanced at their rifles as if ashamed to be holding them. Vanessa stepped forward, voice trembling but fierce. You pointed guns at our family, at children, on our wedding day. Who gave you this tip? Reeves hesitated. His eyes darted toward the street. We received a civilian report. A neighbor. And with that single word, Marcus understood everything. The turning of eyes. Marcus turned sharply, his gaze slicing across the lawn toward the house opposite. Every guest followed his eyes. Slowly, dozens of heads swiveled until they all landed on the curtain where Margaret hid, her pale face illuminated by her own betrayal. Gasps rippled, murmurs spread. Was it her? The Whitfields? She called this in? Margaret staggered back from the window as if struck. For years, she had been the invisible judge, whispering, reporting, watching. But now the entire neighborhood saw her, not as a protector, but as the architect of chaos. A near tragedy. The confrontation teetered on the edge. An agent in the far corner, still wound tight with adrenaline, shouted suddenly, "Gun!" He had mistaken a photographer's camera flash for a weapon. In that instant, fingers twitched dangerously on triggers. Screams erupted. Guests ducked again, but Marcus raised both arms, stepping into the open. "No one fires! This is my command!" His voice carried such authority, such raw command, that even the most anxious agent froze. Silence fell again. The photographer shakily raised his camera, showing it clearly. It's just a camera." The shame deepened across the FBI line. The governor's words. Marcus's chest heaved as he looked across the sea of agents. You came here because of fear, because someone saw black joy and mistook it for danger. You pointed guns at love, at family, at faith. This is what happens when prejudice becomes policy. His voice trembled, but not with fear, with fury and heartbreak. You almost turned my wedding into a massacre. You almost left children without parents, families without loved ones. And why? Because a neighbor couldn't stand to see people who look like me celebrating in a neighborhood like this. Vanessa wept silently beside him, but her eyes burned with pride. The guests, though shaken, straightened. Senators, pastors, teachers, activists, people of every walk of life, stood in solidarity behind the governor. And for the first time, the agents realized they weren't staring down criminals. They were staring down history. Margaret exposed. Across the lawn, phones rose. Videos streamed live to social media. Margaret's face, pale and stricken behind her blinds, was captured in countless lenses. Neighbors whispered her name. Children pointed. Her anonymity, her power to call and vanish, was gone. She staggered back into her living room, trembling. No, this isn't how it was supposed to go. But deep down, she knew. The truth had come for her, faster than she could hide. The silence after the storm. For a moment, the lawn was still, eerily still. The kind of silence that falls not when nothing is happening, but when everyone knows something monumental just shifted. Rifles lowered, one by one. Agents looked at their commander, then at the governor, then at the families trembling before them. the weight of their mistake pressed like a stone on their backs. Special Agent Reeves finally muttered into his radio, "Stand down. All units, stand down." The sound of safeties clicking back into place echoed like a sigh of relief. Guests slowly lifted their heads. Mothers loosened their grip on crying children. The gospel singers clutched each other, whispering prayers of gratitude. Vanessa leaned into Marcus's chest, her veil damp with tears. "It's over, right?" Marcus didn't answer right away. He looked at the sea of men who had almost destroyed his wedding day and shook his head. "No, Vanessa. Not yet." Marcus's speech. He stepped forward onto a chair so every eye, guest, agent, neighbor, could see him. His voice rang across the lawn, raw but unwavering. "You came here because of fear. Not evidence. Not facts. Fear." He swept his arm toward the children clutching their parents. "Look at them. You aimed rifles at kids in flower crowns. You turned love into a battlefield because someone couldn't accept the sight of black joy in their neighborhood." Every word cut deeper. Reeves stared at the ground. Several agents removed their helmets, shame clouding their faces. Marcus's voice dropped, softer now, but sharper still. "This is what bias does. It doesn't just break trust. It breaks lives. Today, no one died. But tomorrow? Tomorrow, someone's child might not be so lucky." He let the silence linger, heavy, inescapable. Then, "I am not just a groom. I am your governor. And I promise you this. The days when fear outweighs justice, when prejudice is treated as credible intel, those days end now." The lawn erupted, not in panic, but in applause. Guests stood, clapping through tears, voices shouting, "Yes! Speak! Tell it!" It wasn't just approval, it was release, a community exhaling years of pent-up truth. Margaret's fall. Across the street, Margaret's world collapsed. Her name was already trending on phones in the crowd. Videos were live. Clips of her peering from behind the blinds were circulating with captions like, "This woman called the FBI on a wedding." She had always prided herself on being respected, even feared. But now, she was neither. She was infamous. Her phone buzzed non-stop. Texts from church friends, angry voicemails, her own relatives demanding, "What did you do?" For the first time in her life, Margaret wasn't the observer. She was the spectacle. And shame, she discovered, is far heavier than suspicion. An unexpected gesture. As the FBI retreated, Marcus turned toward Margaret's house. Everyone expected him to rage, to demand her arrest, to humiliate her in return. Instead, he surprised them all. He walked across the lawn, across the street, across the line that separated neighbor from neighbor. Cameras followed, hearts pounded. Margaret opened her door in a panic, ready for fury. But Marcus didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He spoke with a voice both stern and strangely gentle. "You tried to destroy us today. You called love dangerous. But I will not answer hate with hate." Margaret's lips trembled. I didn't know. I thought—" "No, you didn't think. You judged." His words were final, like a gavel striking. Then he stepped back, his eyes never leaving hers. "And now the whole world will see what judgment looks like when it's stripped bare." He turned away, leaving her trembling in the doorway, her reputation in ruins. That was justice enough. The wedding resumes. Hours later, after the FBI withdrew, after order was restored, the ceremony resumed. The guests were shaken, but determined. The choir lifted their voices higher, stronger, as if to declare, "We will not be silenced." Vanessa walked down the aisle, her hand trembling in Marcus's, but her smile radiant through her tears. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, The cheer that rose wasn't just celebration, it was defiance. It was love proving stronger than fear. Children tossed flower petals into the air. Elders clapped their hands in rhythm. Even neighbors who had watched in silence before now joined in, some ashamed of their own earlier silence, others awakened to how close prejudice had come to stealing joy. And through it all, cameras rolled, not just capturing a wedding, but a moment of history. The broader impact. By nightfall, the story was everywhere. National news, viral headlines, opinion columns, social feeds. Governor's wedding raided by FBI after racist call. Bride still says I do after guns pointed at guests. Neighbors' call sparks national conversation on racial profiling. Talk shows debated. Communities marched. Civil rights leaders pointed to the wedding as proof of systemic bias, while others held it up as a turning point. But beyond politics, the story touched ordinary hearts. People saw themselves in Marcus's fury, in Vanessa's tears, in the guests' fear. People recognized the cost of prejudice, not abstract, not distant, but real, human, breathing before them. Margaret's reckoning. In the weeks that followed, Margaret's life unraveled. Her church asked her to step back. Parents crossed the street rather than let their children near her. She became a symbol of something ugly, something she had always denied lived inside her. At night, she replayed the moment over and over. The rifles, the screams, the governor's voice like fire. She saw the little flower girl's terrified face and felt a shame she couldn't scrub away. For the first time, Margaret faced herself without excuses, and though she couldn't undo the call, she could no longer hide from its truth. Whether she found redemption, that was a choice only she could make. Closing reflection. Months later, Marcus and Vanessa's wedding photos went viral again, not because of the raid, but because of what followed. One image showed Marcus, hand in hand with Vanessa, standing tall as guests cheered behind them, the sun casting golden light over the lawn. Another showed the choir, faces lifted in song, tears shining on cheeks. And another, perhaps the most powerful, showed a line of FBI agents lowering their rifles, shame etched into their faces. Together, the images told a story bigger than a wedding. It was a story about prejudice confronted, about love tested and proven unshakable, about a community that refused to let fear steal its joy. Final voiceover, slow, resonant. In every neighborhood, behind every curtain, there are choices: to fear or to welcome, to judge or to understand. One call can destroy lives, or one moment of courage can change them forever. This was the day a wedding almost became a tragedy, but it also became something more, a mirror held up to us all. The question is not just what Margaret did. The question is, what would we do if love bloomed next door to fear?